Let's now take a look at the Towers of Hanoi algorithm with 3 disks. At this point, I'm assuming you've already played the game, you've already taken a look at the 2-disk version. Because my intention is to move through the program code much more quickly this time, since you've already had some experience with recursion with 2 disks. So here's the code, 3-disk version. Let's begin. The first method call arrives. We'll label this. This is number 1. And it comes in with the values 3, A, B, C. The next method call, from here, this is number 2. It comes in with the values, and remember, we're subtracting 1, and in this case, exchanging positions 2 and 3. So it comes in with the values 2, A, C, B. We arrive, we make another recursive call. This is number 3. And it's going to be 1, A, B, C. Because we arrive with 1, we're going to output the values in C1 and C2. Of course, that's the most visible part of C1 and C2. So I'm outputting the values A and B, and indeed, that's what's going to be appearing on the screen, A and B. Return. Where do I return to? Our most recent call, so that disappears, and arrowhead there. And I'm now going to do the next statement, which is outputting again C1, C2. But at this point, this is the most visible part of the stack. So I'm outputting the A and the C, and it matches. Next line of code, recursive call. This is number 4. The current visible values are here. So 1, and remember I'm exchanging in this case positions 1 and 3 in addition to subtracting 1 from n. So I'm sending in the 1, I'm exchanging positions 1 and 3, and so that's B, C, A. I arrive with 1, I'm going to be performing that statement and outputting the C1 and the C2 values. Of course, this is the current visible layer, and so, yes, I'm outputting B and C. I've just done the 1. Return. Return to where I was most recently called from. Blows away from the top of the stack. I've hit the bottom of the method. I'm returning again. Now where do I return to? Well, I'm going to return to number 2. Disappears. And now I do the next statement. I'm outputting the values in C1 and C2, but of course the current visible values for C1 and C2 are up here, so I'm outputting A, B. And indeed, that does match, A and B. Having just finished that output, I'm now coming down here. I make another recursive call. This is going to be number 5. The current visible values, well, they're up here, remember. So I am subtracting from the 3. That's 2. I'm exchanging positions 1 and 3. So that's 2, C, B, A. I arrive with 2. I will be making a recursive call from here. Gets a little thick and tight, but I'll do it. This is number 6. The current visible values are here, and I'm exchanging positions 2 and 3, so I'm sending in 1, C, A, B. I will have arrived with 1, so I'm doing the output at this point, outputting the C1 and the C2, so I'm outputting C and A, and indeed those match, C and A. Just finished the 1, dropping off the bottom of the method. Now where do I return to? Well, I still have 3 outstanding method calls that have not been returned from. But of course I go back to the most recent one, that's number 6. So that disappears. That disappears. And I'll put an arrowhead on as an indicator that I've come back down that pathway. Do the next line. Outputting the value in C1 and C2. And the current visible values for C1 and C2, right there. And does the CB match? Yes, it does. I'm going to execute the next statement. It's another recursive call. This is going to be number 7. The current visible values are right here. So I'm exchanging positions 1 and 3. So I end up with 1, A, B, C. With a 1, I'm arriving here again, outputting the values in C1 and C2. So I am outputting the A and the B, and those match. And I'm done. Well, no. Remember, I'm deeply buried in some recursive calls, and so I do need to unwind those method calls, returning all the way back to the beginning. So let's begin that process. I'm returning from here. Where do I go back to? My most recent call, number 7, and that is popped off the stack, and I'll put an arrowhead to indicate I came back here. I'm dropping off again. Now where do I return to? Well, you can see that 1 and 5 are the 2 outstanding method calls that have not yet been returned from. So naturally enough, 5 is where I'm going back. That disappears. Those get popped off the stack, and I'll put an arrowhead on as an indicator that I've arrived back. And yet one more return off the bottom of the method. At this point, it's fairly obvious that I'm returning down 1. That disappears, and I'm home again. All of the returns have been completed.